who governs us? That question is far older than Brexit. It is older than Parliament. It is older than the Union. In many respects, it's older than Britain itself. For more than 700 years, England and Scotland have wrestled indeed, different versions of precisely the same argument. Who decides this? Who belongs? Who holds authority? And when does corporation become control? The names change. The centuries pass. The argument remains. To understand why, we must return to a king with a formidable temper, the iron will and the Scottish problem. His name, of course, and I go back to him all the time, was Edward I. Edward looked north and saw uncertainty. He never liked uncertainty. Like many ambitious rulers before and after him, he concluded that uncertainty would usually be improved by his involvement. Scots were less enthusiastic. To them, Edward's involvement looked suspiciously like dominion, and yet so begun a pattern that would repeat itself throughout the centuries. One side believed it was preserving stability. The other believed it was presenting independence. Neither side regarded itself as unreasonable. That is one of the most enduring curiosities of Anglo-Saxon history, or Anglo-Scottish history rather. The English often saw themselves as solving a problem. The Scots often saw themselves as becoming the problem being solved. Neither perspective was entirely rational. The dispute soon produced one of the most enduring figures in British history, William Wallace. Now William Wallace is a character under a degree of speculation. Many believe him to have ruled Scotland. He didn't. He didn't even lead Scotland. Wallace occupies a curious place in Scottish history. He never wore the crown, and yet many people remember him vividly than the kings who did. Historical Wallace and the legendary Wallace are not necessarily the same man, if they're not the same man. History and myth rarely leave one another alone for very long. Ask Mel Gibson. Yet the distinction hardly matters. Wallace became something more powerful than an individual. He became a symbol. He became something greater. Every nation possesses such figures. English have Nelson and Churchill. Scots have Wallace and Bruce. The precise details matter less than the purpose they serve. They provide nations with stories about themselves. The conflict between Edward and Wallace was therefore about far more than territory. It concerned authority, identity, and legitimacy. Who possessed the right to govern? Who possessed the right to determine Scotland's future? The victory of Robert the Bruce at Bannockburn ensured the Scottish would remain an independent kingdom. And today we're looking at it. But independence did not bring an end to the argument. Indeed, the argument expanded. Scotland's answer to the English power was often France, and France's answer to English power was often Scotland, resulting in the Auld Alliance, becoming one of the most desirable strategic partnerships in European history. Scotland's answer to English power was often France, which sometimes it has been said that the worst idea is the French. For generations, English kings faced the possibility of enemies, both north and south. Scotland and France understood a simple strategic truth. England's difficulties could be their opportunities. Yet, history has a habit of frustrating expectations. What appears permanent often proves temporary. What appears temporary often proves permanent. For centuries, England and Scotland faced one another across a contested border. Then history played one of its favourite tricks. The kingdom Edward had once sought to dominate supplied the monarch who would eventually rule England. When James VI of Scotland became James I of England in 1603, relationship between the two nations entered an entirely new phase. Entirely new. Crowns were united. Kings who sat in London were Scottish. The king who sat in Edinburgh was the same man. He even changed religion when he crossed borders. I mean, had anyone informed Edward I this possibility of 3 centuries earlier, he might have even regarded the suggestion as quite absurd. And yet it happened. History rarely travels in straight lines. The question was no longer whether England and Scotland would fight. The question was whether they could build something together. The answer arrived in 1707. The Union transformed further the former rivals into partners. Trade expanded. Economic opportunities increased. The new markets emerged. A shared British state gradually developed. Scottish merchants, engineers, inventors, soldiers, and administrators helped build it. So did their counterparts. History is full of nations that fought one another. Far fewer ended up setting up a parliament together, setting up home together, setting up shop together, a monarch and a future. This is part of the story that modern discussions often overlook.
Then I could kill the king and be crowned with the ancient stone bonnet of Macadar.
What is not yet explained is what happened next, because the greatest chapter in their shared history did not begin on the battlefield. It began after the fighting stopped. Give us a good clicking.
Shakanaka.